Thank you for getting up with us on ESPN after what can only be described as a genuinely terrible night in the National Football League. You see the group that we have here for our Football Friday, and in this hour you'll hear from Adam Schefter, from Rex Ryan, from Booger McFarland, and Marcus Spears on what happened last night. If you were just getting up, let's show it to you there. This was at the very end of a game that had been decided. The Browns and Steelers at the end of a chippy night, and Cleveland had a 14-point lead with 15 seconds left when this happened. Myles Garrett taking Mason Rudolph to the ground. Mason Rudolph taking exception. Myles Garrett, former number 1 pick in the NFL draft, taking off his helmet, and there's the moment. We'll give you a closer look. This probably could have been a whole lot worse based upon the part of the helmet that caught Rudolph in the top of the head and the fight that ensued. Again, the fallout will be significant. Let's hear from all involved after last night's Cleveland win.
You know, that is embarrassing. You know, what I did was foolish, and I shouldn't have allowed myself to slip like that. That's out of character, but a situation like that where, it's an emotional game, like Larry said, and allow myself to fall into those emotions, with that last play and what happened. I hurt my whole team with what I did, and, that could come back to bite us. And I don't know what kind of repercussions I face, but, got to be better.
Of course, that's not who we want to be at the end of the game. That's not who Myles wants to be. That's not who we're going to be. You have to be able to maintain your composure in times like that, and under no circumstance do we want anything to do with anything like that. I'm embarrassed. Myles is embarrassed. It's not good.
What was your perspective on what happened at the end?
I'll keep my thoughts to myself. You guys saw what happened at the end.
You have no comment about it?
That's exactly what I said. I got no comment.
Have you ever seen anything like that at the end of the game?
No more questions regarding that, because I'm saying nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty cowardly, kind of pretty bush league. It's okay though, I'll take it. I'm not going to back down from any bully out there. So we'll see what happens. I don't know.
I said it on the field after. It's inexcusable. He knows that. There's no other way around it. He's going to own up to it. He's going to handle it. And this locker room is going to have to come together, because this is going to be a soap opera on the outside, much like the media has portrayed us to be from the whole season. So we have to be a disciplined team. We have to address it. We have to handle it. We have to come together. Instead of feeling like we just won a game that we really needed, we talk about a singular focus and mindset. It feels like we lost. And so it's going to take time for us to realize that we just won this game, even though it's very obvious with the scoreboard. But that's the tough part.
So all that is what happened. Now let's talk about what happens next. Here's our NFL insider, Adam Schefter. Shefty, what's the latest you're hearing in the aftermath of these events last night?
Bill Greeny, the NFL will be headed in this morning to go over the film, not that there's much to see, and to make a decision about how to best handle the case with Myles Garrett. And I think everybody's waiting to see what the league does, because there's also the possibility that if they want, Mason Rudolph, the Pittsburgh Steelers, could file charges against Myles Garrett for what we now have seen is the closest thing to on-field criminal activity. That was assault last night. That was taking a helmet and violently hitting a player in the head. He could have had a catastrophic result here, and they're fortunate that that didn't happen. You took a helmet, you swing like that. We've never seen anything like this on the football field before. And the last time we saw anything remotely like this maybe would have been when Albert Hainsworth took off the helmet of Andre Garrod, stomped on his face. He got 30 stitches, and Albert Hainsworth was suspended for 5 games. Now, that was 2006. The climate change, the difference between 2006 and 2019 in the NFL is night and day. So if it was 5 games in 2006, you could only imagine what the discipline in this particular case will be. I think it's hard to imagine Myles Garrett playing again this season, but we'll see what the NFL ultimately decides to do today, and then other people could have legal recourse if they so desire based on what the NFL does. And so there's a lot here to be sorted out, and the NFL is on the way in this morning to sort through it all and to make a decision and to hand down a reaction to what everybody saw last night was something that we've never before seen on a football field.
I don't like putting you in a position where I'm asking you to guess, but is there any way to get a sense of how long it will take the league to make a decision like that?
I don't think there's much to decide here. I think they come in. Look, this is a story that's on the lead of Good Morning America, along with everything else going on in our country. When something like this is dominating the headlines like that, and something like this involves player safety that the NFL is sensitive to, I think we'll get something today. And nobody said that to me. But it's only logical. You think the NFL needs to take the weekend to think about this? What is there to think about? There's nothing to think about. We see the tape. I'd like to know what it is that incited Myles Garrett, that led him to basically explode on the field with inexplicable rage. Is there something that Mason Rudolph said? Because if there is, maybe people will say, oh, okay, it doesn't excuse it, but at least we can understand it better. Because what we saw on the field is unimaginable, unthinkable, inexplicable, and that is why, in my mind, the NFL has to react today and react swiftly.
All right, we'll see if they do. And Shefty, obviously, you'll be with us all morning long as we continue this. And I'll bring it out here. Again, this was not anywhere near the Football Friday that we had planned for you today, but these are the things that happened. And all four of you guys played in the National Football League. And so I really want to ask you that to begin with. Just as a player, as a member of this brotherhood, when you saw that last night, Louis Riddick, what was the first thought that went through your mind?
Well, there was a bunch of four-letter words that were coming out of my mouth watching this going, you got to be kidding me what I just saw. Look, I played in an era, I'm a little bit older than the guys here. I played in an era with some of the most vicious players in the NFL, okay? I grew up idolizing Jack Tatum. I remember when Jack Tatum, paralyzed Darryl Stingley. I remember what that hit looks like. I idolized Ronnie Lott. So the viciousness of the game, what happens within the white lines, in the context of the game, I'm all for. I make no apologies for the way the game used to be played. I understand why it's played the way it's played now in the interest of safety. So I get all that. Do not tell me that this you can just wrap into the context of, well, it's just part of the game. Players fight all the time, because that's BS and you know it. And if you're a former player and you try to say that, you know you're lying. This is not in the normal context of the game. What Myles did last night, and look, I understand him and Mason were going at it down there on the bottom of that pile at first, and Mason was pulling at his helmet. We've all seen those kind of fights happen. When a helmet comes off, now all of a sudden understand, you're part of a big fraternity. You're not trying to assault somebody with a helmet. Look at how he swings the helmet. If the crown of that helmet had come down on the top of Mason Rudolph's head, I promise you, we'd be having a different discussion. Because we'd be watching maybe on national TV someone's head split wide open and then bleeding and maybe unconscious, and who knows, maybe something even more unthinkable. So then what would you say? Well, it's just part of the normal course of the game and people get angry? Don't be stupid about this. What Myles did is inexplicable. He does need to sit the rest of the year, and if they take a bunch of his money and make him sit next year, whatever. I don't really care, because you can't do that. If it happens in the course of a game and the game is vicious and people get knocked out, I get all that. Not like this.
Well, and that's where you go. You mentioned during the course of a play versus post-play. And what's unbelievable about this to me is seeing it. Like, the Browns were winning the game. Myles Garrett is playing pretty well. I was on the sideline playing defense when Albert Hainsworth stepped on Andre Giroud's face. He comes running off. He's got blood pouring all over the place. He's got a towel, 30 stitches. He did that out of frustration because he was getting worn out. Like, it was a bad day at the office for him, so he lashes out late. Like, you look at the Browns are winning. It's 21-7. And so as you watch this here and you see it, it doesn't necessarily look all that egregious, but it's a 330-pound man stomping on another man's face, post-play, laying there. Like, I understand Myles Garrett gets into it. He rips the helmet off. But at that point in time, Mason Rudolph's coming at you. That's where it's got to stop. You toss the helmet down. If you want to get in his face and jaw a little bit, then you might see a fine. Maybe you're getting a little flag. But it's not a situation where someone could be hurt. He got 5 games for that. I think probably the NFL, it's a much different climate 15 years later. You're looking at him. The rest of the season is only 6 games. Any playoffs that could potentially be out there, maybe. But the rest of the season probably does sound about right, given where we're at.
But just embarrassed. You said, how did you feel when you watched it? I just couldn't believe it. It went to another level that it's embarrassing to watch as a former player, but at the same time, like you guys know, it's just when the helmets come off, it's like, all right, it's
what is that? You were telling me this before. Generally speaking, if you're on the field and the helmet comes off, what is the first thought you have?
Especially in joint practices, stuff like that. There's fights all the time, and it's a scuffle, it's a push, it's a face mask grab, whatever it is. Okay, people separate it, and it's usually not the quarterbacks, to be honest, but once your helmet comes off, especially Mason Rudolph, dude, I mean, there's not much else you're going to do right there that's a good decision.
Let me get a thought from you, Jonathan Vilma.
There's nothing to defend there. I'm watching Myles Garrett and playing defense. Lou played defense. Bobby played defense. There's nothing that I can say to defend Myles Garrett. I can't even say, well, in practice that happens. That never happens. And you know automatically there's a line to cut off when as soon as the helmets come off, you relax because you're talking about someone's son. You're talking about if he's a father. You're talking about if he's a husband. I mean, we're talking about the livelihood of this player, Mason Rudolph, not just for football, but outside of football as well. You can't do that.
Yeah, this goes, and I'm told Shefty has something else for us. Go ahead, Shefty, jump in here.
Well, one other thing I want to add here. Myles Garrett is a former #1 overall pick. He's got 10 sacks this season, Greeny. And in the course of a matter of moments last night, he delivered an act that will define him for the rest of his NFL career. In one moment, he gave fans a memory that people will always think of him by. When we say Albert Haynesworth, we think of foot stomping. And from now on, no matter what he does for the rest of his career, people will always remember Myles Garrett as the guy that could have killed a football player on a football field by taking his helmet and swinging it like a weapon, like a jackhammer, like a sledgehammer. And that is something that he's going to have to overcome over years. And if he leads the Browns to Super Bowl titles, it won't erase this night. It will always be a part of his resume from this moment on going forward. And the NFL will tack onto it today by handing down what we imagine to be the stiffest suspension in NFL history.
In NFL history. I think that's exactly right, Shefty. Thank you. Let me come over here quickly to you, Bobby, because you mentioned you were involved in the game when we just saw it there with Haynesworth and Gerard. And again, this feels almost unprecedented. As a player, you're not a lawyer. I'm not asking you a legal question. I'm asking you an emotional player question. Do you want to see something more than football discipline done here? I'm reading a lot of stuff on Twitter about getting the police involved, assault, etc. As a player, do you want to see something like that happen?
I hate to play results, but I think in this case you play results with a situation. Mason Rudolph, I don't think that he's going to push this because nothing else happened. And sometimes the fact that you can and understanding that you could go further and you don't is probably all that needs to be done. The fact that, hey, you could do this. This is an act outside of the game. I'm going to be the bigger man in this. I'm not going to get legal, and we're not going to drag it down that road and drag it out for everybody else.
It's easy to sit here without that happening. Would any of you be inclined to press charges against someone who did something like this?
No, and I think I understand, Bobby, and I agree with your point. I think Myles Garrett is lucky. He is very lucky. Because I'll tell you what, Mason Rudolph just got knocked out of a game recently. So he has a history of concussion. He has a history of head trauma. If something – now, look, if he got knocked out and say he went unconscious with that hit, which is totally reasonable, and people are going to keep saying, but he didn't get knocked out. That isn't the point. The point is he got hit on the top of the head with a helmet. We know how heavy helmets are. We know how big and how strong Myles Garrett is. I don't think he'll go down that road. If it was me, I probably wouldn't go down that road, but I'll tell you this. If something had happened to me, you can best believe I'm going to the full extent of the law. If I got knocked out or something like that or it compromised my career, which it is totally reasonable to say you risk compromising that man's career. And that's just, look, I don't really know how else, you can't defend what happened. You just can't, Greeny. You can't. You can't do that. And again, we played the game. Jonathan, look, you played on some of the greatest defenses with some of the greatest players in the history of the game in college football. And you guys were vicious. I'm all for it. Not that.
Not that.
100% agree.
So let me ask you this, because there is another side to this, and that is these teams play each other again in 2 weeks. And we're going to show you at some point tonight the entire highlight of this game. It was a chippy night, to say the least. There were multiple helmet-to-helmet hits, players leaving with concussion, players ejected before this happened, and maybe that contributes to what happened at the end of the game last night. But now they play each other again in 2 weeks. So how does that affect? What happens now?
Well, if we're talking about suspensions or if we're talking about...
Well, let's talk about the fact that these teams have to play each other. There's no way in the world Myles Garrett is playing in that game. That's not even on the list of top conversations here. But I'm talking about these two teams have to then meet again on a field and play a game of football, theoretically within the rules, with all of the feelings that you know still very much remain from all of this.
Well,
so how does that go?
Well, that's where the NFL takes charge, right? The NFL suspends Myles Garrett. They suspend Marcus Pouncey and then suspend Ogunjobi. I don't want to butcher his
Larry
name,
Ogunjobi, yes.
You talk about now removing what was a catalyst for this incident so that when there is the chippiness come 2 weeks from now, it's not the chippiness or resentment from what happened and why this player didn't get suspended or why this player got suspended for too long, etc. It's just the chippiness of the game of being a rivalry. And Frank, I don't even know why it's a rivalry because Cleveland has been on the wrong side of this rivalry for so long. If I'm the Steelers, I need to step up my level of play. That just tells me how far the Steelers have fallen this season when they're looking at the Browns as a rivalry game, and we got to step up for it.
I see your point, though, Greeny. Look, I mean, I played in that rivalry. I played for the Browns for years. And, look, I get your point, JV, but I'll tell you this. Like, because of how close they are proximity-wise in terms geographically, that is a heated rival. I don't care if both teams were 0-16 every year. They don't like each other at all. And now – oh, my goodness.
Well, it's almost more
like – Are you kidding me?
Like
it's going to be off the chain as far as how – chippy's not even the right word.
Ref that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
not even the right word.
Almost more of a college rivalry, like you said, because the proximity of it. You played Miami, Florida State, Ohio State, Michigan, whatever it is.
I mean, that's real.
There's an edict that's coming down from the NFL. They're going to make a statement with the suspensions.
But there's not going to be any extra curricular activity. That's what I'm saying.
Because I think
they're going to have hard hitting as you normally would.
Well, in baseball, they have these games where both benches get warned. I have a feeling everybody's warned going into this. I'm told Rex is ready to go. Rex Ryan is with us here. Rex, you've been a part of football literally your entire life. Your father was a legendary coach. You grew up in the game, and you have coached some of the nastiest players that we can ever remember. And I mean that respectfully and almost in a positive way. So I just would like to give you the floor. What was your reaction to what happened last night?
It might have been, one of the worst things I've ever seen in football. I've never seen anything worse than that. It's just got no part for it. Look, and you're right. I appreciate you saying I coach some of the nastiest guys, most aggressive, physical players. I appreciate that because that's what the game's all about. But it's within the confinements of the rules. What this guy did, this is assault, and this is ridiculous. He could have killed that man. And to me, it's, is he going to be suspended? Hell yeah, he's going to be suspended. He'll be suspended for the rest of the year, and hopefully this kid gets some idea. They got to take him to anger management. They got to do something, but it's ridiculous. And to me, that's how I feel about it. It just, it's just ridiculous. You want to see that type of stuff, like the fans want to see it? Hell no, they don't want to see it. They want to see that, they can watch MMA or whatever. But this is football. And it should be played aggressively, but everything's within the confinements of the rules. As soon as that helmet came off, everybody knows you get the heck away from it. Everybody knows that.
Rex, they have 6 games the Browns do left in their season. One would assume it's almost unimaginable that Myles Garrett will play in any of those, but they do continue their season. So if you're their coach now, if you're Freddie Kitchens and you show up for meetings, whenever that is, today or the next time, what are you saying to your football team after something like that happens?
Well, I've never been in that situation, so I guess the biggest thing would be, number one, obviously, you say what an asinine move it was. That has no part in this game, and they're going to outwardly support their player, but nobody supports what he did. There's not one person in the Browns organization that supports what he did. And the problem is, I think Freddie, when they talked to him after the game, was very real about it. That, it took away from what they accomplished. They beat Pittsburgh, and they beat the heck out of Pittsburgh. 4 interceptions in the game. They were playing great, and it took a selfish act by this individual. This is the guy that I voted for MVP, defensive MVP of the league at the beginning of the year, and he did something like this. It's just unexcusable. As Baker Mayfield, I finally agree with Baker. It was unexcusable, but it's you got to move on as a team. Say, look, we got to move on now, and there's a lot of positive things he's going to draw from this game, and one of them is being physical. Like, they were physical. That's how you beat Pittsburgh. You got to be more physical than they were, and that's it. But this has nothing to do with being physical. This is being selfish, stupid, and cowardly.
Well said. Rex, thanks a million. Thank you for a couple of minutes here today, and we'll see you on Monday. There's so many layers to this that we will continue to explore as the morning goes on. If you did not see it last night, what you're seeing there is Larry Ogunjobi, after all of that happened, just rushing up from behind and shoving Mason Rudolph to the ground in what was also a very dirty moment. And
so cheap.
Candidly,
and you know, his comments, I saw them interview him after the game, and his comments were, you know, look, I'm just going out there to run and protect my brother. When I saw that, I was like, Larry.
Idiot.
What you did was you said
Larry.
Exactly.
That's what it was.
What you did was you took a cheap shot at a guy with no helmet on and hit him in the back.
We're going to hear those comments from him. You're going to hear from Marquise Pouncey again, because one of the real questions here will be, he went to the ground to defend his player, and candidly,
David DeCastro
went to the ground, and then the punch and the kicking. So we're going to discuss all this as we go. Let me take a short break here, but obviously coverage of this continues all morning long on Get Up. After the Myles Garrett incident, Pouncey begins kicking.